They called them the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, but they were anything but poor. Behind white mantles marked with red crosses, the Knights Templar rose from humble protectors of pilgrims to the most powerful organization in the medieval world. They commanded armies, financed kings, and shaped empires. Yet their influence stretched far beyond the battlefield, into secrets that even the Church dared not confront. Then, one morning in 1307, they vanished. Their leader burned at the stake. Their castles fell silent. And their legendary treasure, gold, relics, forbidden scrolls, disappeared without a trace. Some say it was lost. Others insist it was hidden. But a few believe the Templars never vanished at all, that they simply changed their name and waited. Because the real treasure of the Templars may not have been gold, but knowledge. Knowledge powerful enough to shake the foundations of faith and empire. And if that's true, it means the greatest secret of the Middle Ages is still alive today. For 200 years, the Knights Templar stood at the crossroads of faith, war, and power. Born in the chaos of the Crusades, they were soldiers sworn to poverty. Yet somehow, they became richer than the kings they served. Their mission seemed simple: protect Christian pilgrims on their journey to the Holy Land. But what began as an act of devotion soon transformed into something far greater. The Templars mastered trade, politics, and finance. They built castles in every corner of Europe, from the sands of Jerusalem to the misty highlands of Scotland. They became the architects of an empire hidden within an empire, a network so vast that even monarchs borrowed money from them. And that was their first mistake. Because when kings owe knights more than they can repay, history always ends in blood. The year was 1307. France's King Philip IV was drowning in debt, and desperate men do desperate things. One October dawn, he struck first, accusing the Templars of heresy, blasphemy, and devil worship. His soldiers raided their commanderies, seized their gold, and dragged their leaders in chains through the streets of Paris. It was the end of an era, or at least, it should have been. But what happened next defied every expectation. The Templar treasure, their vast wealth, sacred relics, and archives, vanished before the king's men arrived. Entire ships disappeared from French ports. Fortresses were found empty. Documents and artifacts that could rewrite history simply ceased to exist. And centuries later, traces of that same symbol, the Red Cross of the Templar Order, began appearing again. In secret brotherhoods, in royal architecture, even in the founding myths of nations across the world. What survived wasn't just gold or knowledge, it was an idea. The idea that faith, power, and secrecy could be woven together to control history itself. Today, their story remains one of the greatest enigmas ever told, part legend, part warning, and perhaps, part truth still buried beneath the stones of ancient temples. Because behind every myth lies a motive. And behind every motive, a secret someone was willing to die for. So, who were the Knights Templar really? Holy warriors of God, or the first global conspirators? Guardians of sacred relics, or keepers of a truth too dangerous to reveal? The answers lie not just in what they found, but in what they chose to hide. Jerusalem, a city drenched in blood and faith. In 1119, it stood at the heart of a world torn between holy devotion and human greed. Crusaders from every corner of Europe marched under the banner of the cross, claiming to fight for God, but most fought for land, gold, and glory. Amid this chaos, 9 knights made a vow that seemed almost naive: to protect unarmed Christian pilgrims on their journey to the Holy Land. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The world would come to know them as the Knights Templar. They took no wives, swore no oaths to kings, and vowed poverty and obedience. But from the very beginning, their purpose carried an air of mystery. Their headquarters was established not in a palace or fortress, But atop the ruins of Solomon's Temple, the most sacred site in all of Judaism, said to be the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. For 9 years they barely emerged. No records of battles, no signs of public service, just silence. Hidden beneath the temple, they excavated tunnels, and what they found there remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. Some say they discovered the Holy Grail, the cup said to hold Christ's blood. Others whisper it was ancient scrolls, knowledge buried since the time of Solomon, secrets of geometry, alchemy, and divine power that would one day reshape Europe. Whatever they uncovered transformed them. When they finally re-emerged, they were no longer poor. Backed by the blessing of the Church, the Templars gained immense privileges: exemption from taxes, independence from kings, and freedom to move across borders. And then, the miracles began. Templar castles appeared from the deserts of the Levant to the green valleys of France. They could travel unchallenged, move gold safely across continents, and command the respect of every ruler they met. What began as a humble brotherhood of 9 became the first global network of power. But power never stays pure for long. The Templars' transformation raised a question that still echoes today: were they chosen by God or guided by something else entirely? From the dusty roads of Jerusalem to the marble halls of Europe, the Templars' influence spread like wildfire. Within a century they had become something unimaginable: an army, a church, and a bank, all in one. They wore simple white mantles marked with a red cross, a symbol of sacrifice and purity. But behind that humble image was an organization more structured, more disciplined, and more powerful than any kingdom in Christendom. The Templars built fortresses that defied siege and time itself, solid, symmetrical, and eerily identical, no matter where they stood. From the deserts of the Holy Land to the cliffs of Portugal, these fortresses formed a hidden network, a chain of safe houses, treasuries, and coded routes that allowed their wealth to move faster than any army. Kings trusted them with gold. Merchants deposited their fortunes. Even pilgrims carried letters of credit that allowed them to travel without fear of bandits, a system so advanced it became the world's first international bank. With each transaction, the Templars' invisible empire grew. They were knights of God, yes, but also the world's first financiers. They loaned money to monarchs, funded wars, and even held the keys to royal treasuries. Their influence reached deep into the courts of Europe. Their word was trusted more than that of any king. But power like this comes with a price. Whispers began to spread that the Templars were no longer serving Christ, but themselves. That beneath their temples and monasteries, they practiced secret rituals. That their oaths were not to the Pope, but to something far older. There were stories of skulls used in ceremonies, of the name Baphomet uttered in darkness, of men kissing one another in strange rites of initiation. To the fearful, it looked like heresy. To the envious, it looked like justification. The Templars dismissed it all as slander. But the rumors had already taken root, and in a world ruled by fear and faith, rumors were more dangerous than swords. Even the Pope began to watch them carefully. How could a brotherhood of monks own fleets, fortresses, and fortunes greater than entire nations? By the mid-13th century, the Templars had become untouchable, masters of trade, war, and secrecy. Their banners flew over the most strategic ports in the Mediterranean. Their ships crossed seas that no king dared to claim. And yet, in the shadows, a rival was waiting. A man who owed them everything, and would destroy them to erase his debt. His name was Philip IV of France, the king who would turn faith into fear, and loyalty into ashes. It began in silence, the kind of silence that only comes before a storm. Friday, October 13th, 1307. A date that would echo through time. As dawn broke over France, soldiers spread across the kingdom, armed not with war cries but with sealed orders. When those orders were opened, the world of the Templars ended. King Philip IV, once their ally, now their betrayer, accused the Knights Templar of heresy, blasphemy, and crimes against God. His motives were not holy. He was broke, buried under debts owed to the very knights he now condemned. By sunrise, every Templar in France was under arrest. Their castles were raided, their treasuries seized, and their banners torn from the walls. The red cross that had once symbolized faith now marked them for death. The accusations were monstrous. The knights were said to worship a demon named Baphomet, to spit on the cross, to perform obscene rituals in the dark. In the age of faith, these weren't just crimes, they were damnation. Under torture, many confessed. Fingers were broken, limbs stretched, skin burned. Some confessed just to make the pain stop, others held their silence until they died. Among them stood their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, an old man who had given his life to the order. After years of imprisonment and interrogation, he was led to the stake on an island in the river Seine. As the flames rose, he lifted his voice, not in pain, but in prophecy. He declared the innocence of his brothers and called upon both the Pope and the King to meet him before God's judgment, within a year. And then, surrounded by smoke and fire, he cursed them. Weeks later, Pope Clement V fell ill and died. Months after that, King Philip was thrown from his horse and died suddenly in agony. Both were gone, just as de Molay had foretold. But the story didn't end with vengeance. Because when the soldiers raided the Templar strongholds, they found something strange. The treasuries were empty. The vaults that should have been overflowing with gold were bare. Witnesses spoke of carts that had left Paris days before the arrests, guarded by loyal knights. Others whispered of ships that vanished from the port of La Rochelle, entire fleets setting sail under the cover of night. No one knew where they went. No one ever found them. What was once a symbol of divine power had now become a legend, the lost treasure of the Knights Templar. And from that day forward, Friday the 13th would be remembered not just as a date of bad luck, but as the morning the most powerful brotherhood in the world disappeared into shadow. The morning after the Templar arrests, France was eerily calm. But across the coastline of La Rochelle, whispers told a different story. Witnesses spoke of torches flickering on the docks, ships weighed down with chests, banners torn away, sails disappearing into the mist. The Templar fleet, dozens of ships, had vanished without a trace. To King Philip, it was infuriating. He had captured the knights, seized their lands, and burned their leader, yet the one thing he wanted most, their treasure, had slipped through his fingers. Where did it go? Some said the ships sailed north, beyond the reach of the French crown, to Scotland, a land excommunicated by the Church, where exiled knights might find refuge among rebellious clans. Legends tell of a secret alliance with Robert the Bruce, the outlawed Scottish king. When Bruce won his miraculous victory at Bannockburn in 1314, against all odds, whispers claimed that shadowy warriors fought beside him, bearing the cross of the temple. Others claimed the Templars sailed to Portugal, where their legacy quietly continued under a new name, the Order of Christ. The same cross that once marked their shields reappeared centuries later, emblazoned on the sails of explorers who would change history. Vasco da Gama, Henry the Navigator, and even Christopher Columbus. The Templar Red Cross had found its way back to the sea. But not every treasure was made of gold. Beneath churches, under castles, and within hidden catacombs across Europe, secret vaults began to appear, sealed rooms filled with Templar symbols and markings. In places like Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, cryptic carvings tell of a brotherhood guarding sacred knowledge long after its fall. Columns etched with vines from the New World, centuries before Columbus ever sailed there. Strange, precise geometries echoing ancient Hebrew mysticism. Coincidence? Or a coded message left behind? Some researchers believe these hidden sanctuaries were part of an escape plan, a second network created for the moment the Church turned against them. If true, it meant the Templars had foreseen their betrayal. But one theory goes even deeper. The fleet that vanished from La Rochelle, they say, didn't just sail to another kingdom, it sailed into secrecy. Its ships may have carried relics from beneath Solomon's temple itself, artifacts capable of reshaping both history and faith. And if those relics survived, then so did the Order's greatest secret. Because gold fades, kingdoms fall, but ideas and secrets endure. The Templars may have disappeared from sight, but their presence began to ripple through time. Hidden symbols, whispered rituals, and mysterious brotherhoods started to appear across Europe, carrying echoes of their lost creed. The world thought the Templars were gone, but in truth, they had only changed their face. Long before the arrests, before the rise and fall of kingdoms, before their power consumed them, the Knights Templar were seekers. And everything begins where their name began, at the Temple of Solomon. When the 9 original knights took residence there in 1119, Jerusalem had just been reclaimed by the Crusaders. Their purpose, to guard pilgrims, seemed noble, but their actions told another story. For 9 years, they barely appeared in public. They fought no battles, recorded no conquests, and built no fortresses. Instead, they dug. Beneath the ancient stones of Solomon's temple, they tunneled deep into the earth, searching, some say, for relics left from the time of King Solomon himself. The Bible speaks of the temple as the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant, a chest that held the tablets of the 10 Commandments and radiated divine power so great it could destroy armies. But many other texts hint at something more: forbidden knowledge, sacred geometry, and lost wisdom connecting heaven and earth. So what did the Templars find in those tunnels? No one knows for sure. But after those 9 silent years, the Templars emerged transformed. Almost overnight, they gained immense power, papal privilege, and mysterious influence. The Church that once questioned their existence suddenly embraced them as holy warriors. Coincidence or consequence? Some scholars suggest they discovered ancient scrolls, writings that revealed the mathematical and mystical principles of sacred architecture. Those principles reappeared in the Gothic cathedrals of Europe, built with precision far beyond the knowledge of their age. Chartres, Reims, and Notre Dame, each aligned with celestial geometry, each pulsing with the same hidden code. Others believe they uncovered something that challenged the Church itself, documents or relics that contradicted official doctrine. Perhaps even evidence about Jesus's bloodline, a truth powerful enough to fracture the faith of medieval Europe. There are legends of the Holy Grail, not as a cup, but as a symbol, a vessel of divine knowledge passed from the ancient world to those deemed worthy. If the Templars found it, or what it represented, it would explain their sudden wealth, their defiance of kings, and their secretive initiation rites. And then there are the whispers, that the Templars discovered teachings far older than Christianity. That deep within those tunnels, they encountered remnants of the mystery schools of Egypt, or texts connected to Kabbalah, Sufism, and other esoteric traditions. In the eyes of the Church, such knowledge would have been heresy. But to the Templars, it may have been revelation. Their symbols, the 2 riders on one horse, the equal-armed cross, the hidden geometry, began to appear everywhere. These weren't just decorations. They were messages, clues, proof that what they found beneath the temple had become the foundation of a hidden philosophy, one that would survive long after their destruction. And perhaps it still does. Because if the Templars carried forbidden knowledge into exile, it didn't die with them. It simply changed form, finding new homes, new names, and new faces across the centuries that followed. The flame that once burned beneath Solomon's temple would be passed on, flickering in the symbols of secret societies that would shape the modern world. Centuries passed. Kingdoms fell. The church that condemned the Templars faded into corruption and reform. Yet, somehow, their shadow never disappeared. Across Europe, new brotherhoods began to emerge, secretive, structured, and obsessed with symbols that mirrored the old Templar code. They called themselves many things: Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and later, the Illuminati. But beneath the new names lay familiar patterns: rituals of initiation, hidden knowledge, and the pursuit of enlightenment through secrecy. Coincidence? Or continuation? The Freemasons, in particular, seemed to inherit the Templars' blueprint. Their temples, symbols, and hierarchies bore striking resemblance to those of the long-lost order. The compass and square, emblems of divine architecture, echoed the same sacred geometry found in the cathedrals the Templars built. Even their legendary Grand Master, Hiram Abiff, the builder of Solomon's Temple, seemed to be a symbolic reflection of the Templars' own beginnings beneath those same stones. But it didn't stop with architecture. In the 15th century, Portugal, one of the few nations that refused to destroy the Templars, quietly rebranded the order as the Knights of Christ. Under this new name, they became patrons of exploration. They funded voyages into uncharted oceans, carrying not swords but maps, symbols, and the same red cross once worn in battle. Centuries later, that same cross adorned the sails of ships that would forever change the world: Columbus, Magellan, da Gama. Their journeys weren't just about trade or discovery. To some historians, they represented a secret mission, a continuation of the Templar dream to build a world shaped by their vision of divine order. Even the birth of new nations carried their mark. In the architecture of Washington, D.C., Templar and Masonic symbols are woven into the city's design. The compass, the obelisk, the all-seeing eye. The founding fathers, many of them Freemasons, spoke of enlightenment, liberty, and hidden wisdom, ideals that traced their lineage straight back to the brotherhood that had once challenged both kings and the church. In art, literature, and religion, their influence endured. The Templar cross became a timeless emblem, worn by crusaders and conspiracy theorists alike. Every few decades, a new legend arises. The Holy Grail, the Shroud of Turin, the Ark of the Covenant, each somehow linked back to the same brotherhood that vanished in 1307. But what if the Templars' true survival wasn't physical at all? What if they understood something that others didn't? That the most powerful treasure isn't gold, but belief. Belief that ideas can outlive empires. That faith, once bound by institutions, can be reborn in secrecy. That knowledge, when hidden, becomes power. From the Masons' temples to the symbols on our currency, from cathedrals to capitals, the fingerprints of the Templars are everywhere, a silent inheritance from a brotherhood that refused to die. The order may have been destroyed in name, but in spirit it evolved into a force that shaped the modern world. And yet, their greatest secret, the treasure itself, still waits unanswered. If the Templars passed on their philosophy, their power, their ideals, then perhaps they also passed on their most dangerous relic, the truth that got them killed. The story of the Templars has always ended in flames. The fire that consumed Jacques de Molay's body on the Isle de la Cite wasn't just an execution, it was a symbol, a spark meant to erase them, yet one that illuminated a deeper truth. Because the more the Church tried to destroy their memory, the stronger their legend became. The treasure, the curse, the secret, all refused to die. But here's the question few ever ask: what if the treasure was never meant to be found? Think about it. The ships that vanished, the vaults left empty, the symbols carved into stone, they all tell the same story. The Templars were not running from destruction, they were preserving something. A secret too powerful for kings, too sacred for priests. What if the gold was knowledge? the understanding that divine truth didn't belong to the Church, but to humanity itself. Their rituals, long condemned as heresy, may have been remnants of a greater wisdom, one that merged the spiritual and the scientific, heaven and earth, geometry and God. They sought not wealth, but enlightenment, a way to connect with the divine without intermediaries. And that idea terrified those in power. When Jacques de Molay cursed his accusers, it wasn't vengeance. It was prophecy, because the world they built, of kings, popes, and fear, would one day crumble. In its place would rise a new order, nations born of reason, science, and freedom. The very values the Templars were accused of betraying became the foundation of the modern world. Look closely and you'll see their fingerprints everywhere, in the symbols on our money, the architecture of our cities, the principles of our law. The brotherhood that once protected pilgrims ended up shaping civilization itself. Perhaps that was the true treasure, the idea that knowledge, once awakened, cannot be burned. The Templars may have perished in fire, but their vision survived in the minds of those who came after, whispered through centuries of secrecy, resurfacing whenever humanity was ready for a new dawn. And so, their legacy endures, not as a pile of gold buried beneath a temple, but as a flame passed hand to hand, generation to generation. A flame that still burns, even now. Centuries have passed since the last Templar drew breath, yet their shadow still stretches across our world. Their castles may lie in ruins, their names buried in forgotten scrolls, but their legend refuses to fade. Maybe that's because their story was never really about treasure. It was about transformation. From knights to mystics, from guardians of pilgrims to guardians of secrets, the Templars became a bridge, between faith and reason, between God and man, between history and myth. Every time a new age begins, their symbols seem to return. The cross, the circle, the sacred number, the hidden code. As if the Templars left behind not riches, but a riddle meant for the future, for us. Perhaps the real treasure lies not beneath stone or sea, but in the questions they left unanswered. What did they find beneath Solomon's temple? What truth was so powerful it had to be buried in secrecy? And if that truth survived, are we still living in the world they built? The Templars vanished in fire, yet from their ashes rose the modern world, one shaped by their echoes, their knowledge, and their daring to defy those who claim divine authority. Their story reminds us that truth, once discovered, can never truly be destroyed. It only waits, in symbols, in myths, in whispers, for those brave enough to seek it. So perhaps the greatest treasure of the Knights Templar isn't lost at all. Perhaps it's been hiding in plain sight, not in gold or relics, but in us.